So, hi everyone. Hope you're all well. Today we are joined by the lovely Sylvia Mukasa, who is an award-winning entrepreneur. She's a tech consultant. She's a tech women fellow, a STEM educator, a champion for gender and racial equity. And she is also the CEO of Global X Investment Limited, among a whole host of other accolades. I could not do it justice enough. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's wonderful. So why don't we just start by telling us a bit about yourself? Who is Sylvia?
Okay, so Sylvia is very passionate about STEM. A lot of people sometimes ask what STEM is. We assume everyone understands what it is. So for those who don't know, STEM is basically science, technology, engineering, and maths. And I'm very passionate about championing for especially girls and women in the STEM space. And I'm also very passionate about using technology for impact, both in businesses and also for social impact. And so around that, I run Global X Investments Limited, and we also operate as Global X Innovation Labs. Wonderful. And what we do is we close the gap around skilling, funding, and digital transformation, and focus on emerging technologies. So an entrepreneur, and also generally addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So around that, I focus on gender and also race.
Awesome. Yeah. And what made you venture into, or to rather feel compelled to champion STEM and to champion female leadership and gender and racial equity?
Okay. So I think everybody has had the statement that there's underrepresentation of women in the STEM fields.
Absolutely.
And so when we look at underrepresentation, it's come about a lot of the time because of cultural biases and stereotypes along the way. So you find a lot of girls don't get into STEM because they feel it's a boys'
boys' club, yeah.
Right. And also even the kind of things that teachers say, you'll be surprised at what teachers tell students, even at university level. You get into a lecture hall and the first thing your lecturer is saying, looking at you and you're a woman, and they're like, you know what, this is not the course for you. And maybe you're sat in an engineering class or a math class. And a lot of these things, people don't realize how they impact how girls and women generally look at some of these fields, because what you're told sometimes shapes you. And especially when you hear those things in your formative years, from around the age of 6, children actually begin to show the internalized stereotypes. So when they start hearing those kind of things, when you're buying toys for them, even as a parent, and you're giving the boys the cars and you're giving the girls the dolls, then what are you telling them? You may not realize what you're doing, but what you're telling them is this, this space is for girls and this is for boys. So it's very important to sensitize people about those kind of things, because they are actually impacting the number of girls and women in STEM. And so that awareness is very important for me, and this is why I've set out to get out there. Another thing is, and I've been asked this question before so many times, why do we need women in STEM? Or why do we need women in tech? And there's a lot of examples of things that have actually not worked out well for women because they were never part of the design processes of tech products. Mobile phones, for example, some of them cannot fit in the palms of women because they're too big. And when you look at the people who are behind those designs, you'll find it's men behind them, and they're using their hands to, lift these things. Okay. And no women are involved in those processes. So how we design products needs women involved in that. Exactly. Otherwise, we end up with products that are not suitable for women. Seatbelts, again, that has been said before as an example.
It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. And then especially for pregnant women, And it's because in the design process, those things were not thought about. And sometimes it's not deliberate. It's not that men are just designing these things because they don't care about women. It's just that some of these things don't occur to them when they're doing those things.
That there'll actually be a difference
Yeah.
in how it will fit for a woman. And I think I like what you're saying here. And it's not just about the general stuff like a phone or a seatbelt. I've even heard people complain about the mammogram itself.
Exactly.
If it was designed by a woman, we would not have the current design we have.
Yeah. So, yeah. So it's very important to bring out these things and have conversations around them and just make people know that it's very important to have inclusive teams, because then you get a variety of ideas and you're able to come up with products that are suitable for everyone and not problematic for certain demographics. Yeah.
All right, wonderful. I'm going to take you back to a statement you mentioned about the universities and the things that lecturers say, which is true. Even when girls, myself growing up, you're trying to figure out which course you want to do. More often than not, whoever's giving you the advice, depending on who it is, will steer you towards a more gender-based, it's less capability-based
Precisely.
and more gender-based versus the kind of advice that will go to boys. And I'm curious to find out what is some of the work that you are doing to empower and create awareness, especially for these young girls, when it comes to STEM and the opportunities that are there for women.
Okay, so I am involved in different initiatives. So, for example, I've served as Kenya's inaugural ambassador for the Next Einstein Forum. And the Next Einstein Forum is basically a platform that connects humanity with science and also pushes...
Okay.
Yeah.
If you could start from the Next Einstein
Forum. Okay. Yeah. So the Next Einstein Forum is basically a platform that connects science to humanity and also pushes to get the next brightest innovators from the African continent. And this is why it's got the name Einstein. And some people have asked why Einstein, and this is an African initiative. And it's basically because a lot of the time when you ask Africans to name an African scientist, that doesn't automatically come out. They'll tell you Einstein or, somebody else, but it's never an African name, which is quite a shame.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
So through the Next Einstein Forum, for example, as ambassadors, one of the roles is to, try and push for this innovations from young Africans and also try and break these barriers, who are the women in STEM, for example, on the African continent. We have to showcase these faces and role models because, again, if girls cannot connect or if women cannot connect with a female face, it becomes a struggle. When we look at books, again, going back to school, and this is why it's very important for schools to really address these things and right from, primary school onwards. Because when you look at books, for example, you find images, you're looking at a microscope, for example, and the person behind the microscope is highly likely male.
Yes.
We need to start having images of these women scientists in labs and whatever else so that, it doesn't seem a far-fetched thing for, for girls and also for women. So championing for those kind of things, showcasing these female role models, putting their faces out there. And then again, there's something that women struggle with. We tend to want to play the humble, when you speak out and when you put yourself out there.
But that's what we're told. That's what we're told. Women should be humble, should be soft-spoken, should be polite.
Yeah.
And if you're loud, the thing is, what's wrong with you? Why are you going out of character?
Yes. Yeah. So, and even when you ask for women to come out or even speak, ask them to speak, sometimes very few of them will come out. I have had to go out there and say, you know what, I think you'll make a very good speaker on this topic, and I need you to speak around this. And some of them have gone ahead to now take up more speaking opportunities, something that they never even thought about. So women don't put themselves out there very easily. Very few of them do that. So you have to sort of push for them. And those are some of the things that I have been trying to do in the spaces that I am in. So the Next Einstein Forum is just one example. There's other examples. Even our work at Global X, for example, we have an inclusive AI initiative that is targeted for women to get more women into AI, right? Because again, what has been said is across the world, there's only about 22% of the workforce in AI that are women. And when you go to AI conferences, for example, 80% of the presenters are male. So how do we get more women into this kind of spaces? And those are some of the things that I've been doing through Global X, through and other initiatives. So I've also, for example, led the Women in Tech Africa Kenya chapter for the past 6 years. And then again, that was a space that was looking at getting women to get mentors and also learn what's happening in the technology landscape on the continent and across the world. So looking at the different topics on what's trending, and also speaking about tech entrepreneurship, because how do we get more women entrepreneurs in technology? Again, we have to have those conversations and provide that support role to get a lot of them there. So those are just examples of what I've been doing.
That is amazing. There's a lot, I admire a lot of the work that you're doing. And I'm assuming it's clearly not an easy journey for you. And I'm curious to know, what are some of the challenges that you had to overcome as you build up and grow all this great work that you're doing?
Okay, so I think the biggest challenge for me was lack of mentorship, right? I did not really have what I'd call mentors. And so I had to navigate my path almost alone, discovering, making blunders and, doing all manner of things. And I have a mixed education background, and that enabled me to try out different things. So at some point I thought I'd be an accountant. So I even studied the accounting, an accounting qualification, ACCA. And then I got very bored, I was more keen on, in fact, helping set up accounting applications like Sage Pastel to automate accounting processes. So it was more the technology side that was appealing for me. And then I ended up discovering, through all this, different things that I was doing, I ended up discovering I was passionate about tech and not, other things that I'd been doing all along. And so I think if I had mentorship, I would not have gone in circles to discover myself. And I don't regret it, because it helps me also engage with different people. I can speak financial language, I can speak tech language, I can speak business language, and so many other things. So that worked out well, but it was proper circles before I got to where I wanted to be. And then the other challenge has been unconscious bias, especially in tech. A lot of the time in the spaces that I've been in, I'll find either I'm the only woman or maybe there's just a handful of other women. And it's because, again, when you look at speaking opportunities, if people are not deliberate in picking the kind of speakers on their platforms and ensure that there are women on those panels, you'll always have no women on in those spaces. And this is why the unconscious bias has to be dealt with, because you have to be aware that you might be doing things without realizing you're cutting out some people, right? So we have to ensure that people are aware that they have to be very deliberate in getting women in different spaces so that they're not left out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I like what you say about, the unconscious bias. And you even gave an example of a panel where majority were men. And there was a time back where there was a workshop on women empowerment, and they were discussing the challenges that women face in employment. And the entire panel was male. And a lot of people on social media went up in arms. How are we discussing? How are we going to hear from men telling us about challenges that women are facing.
Precisely.
Now, I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't attend. I don't know how many women attended, but I'm pretty sure looking at all the comments that were there, they didn't get a lot of it.
About it.
You heard about it?
I did hear about it.
Yes.
And I just said, no way. I'm not, I cannot be part of that. And it's really disturbing.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of these conversations go on without women, and you're wondering why people discussing matters affecting women, and they don't, and it doesn't even occur to them that women should be there.
Exactly, absolutely. And there's something else you mentioned about even having that visibility for women, something that resonates with them. You talked about even the toys that parents pick out for their children. And this is something I've actually really struggled with being a parent, to find even toys that resemble my daughter, how she is, how her hair is, or even finding toys that interest her, because she is interested in science. So finding something that is science related. There's a lot of times I have shopped for my daughter in the boys section.
There we go. And why do we even have the boys section and the girls section in the first place?
Absolutely. Because,
unless, especially when it comes to toys, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because ideally, even as we're going now, we have engineers who are women, we have construction workers who are women, we have scientists who are women, even teachers, all the way to we even have presidents. So ideally, these toys, there's no such thing as saying this toy is for boys and this is for girls. We should just have a kids section.
Exactly.
And let the kids pick what they want to play with.
Precisely.
What resonates with them. You find a boy maybe who's interested in dolls, or a girl who's interested in cars.
Yeah.
That's fine. We have men who are fashion designers, and we have women who are race car drivers.
Yeah. Precisely.
Yeah.
So we have to really break those barriers and stop, putting these walls that just are compounding a problem by our actions, And even as you say that, the other day I was at my brother's house, and he was asking his son about a ball that they had to do and take to school. He's 5, and he said, yeah, I took my ball. And, and my brother was like, why? What did the teacher say? And he said, she didn't say anything. And then he was asked, did any other children bring in anything? And he said, the girls brought in dolls.
That is very unfortunate. There was actually, and you've reminded me of a scenario a few years back. And might be maybe they're in the same class at the time. A few years back, my daughter's school had a project where they're supposed to make toys. It might be the same project your nephew was doing. And the girls were also asked, the boys were asked to make cars, the box cars.
Yes.
And the girls were asked to make dolls. And I called the teacher and I was asking her, why? First of all, my daughter doesn't even like playing with dolls. So why are you asking her to make a doll?
There we go.
You should say the options are dolls and cars, makes what works for you.
Exactly.
So we made a car. Yeah. She passed. Partly maybe because I complained bitterly, but clearly that is, and I like what you're saying here, because in schools when they're very young, that is when these biases are clearly being set.
Exactly.
And we really need to evaluate. Now, the concerning thing for me is that our education system is already revised. It's quite new. So the amount of time it would take to even revise it again, and it was revised still with an unconscious bias imposed.
It's very unfortunate. And this is why, again, we can't leave everything to schools or academia. This is why there's need for those programs outside of academia, so that they fix some of these gaps. Otherwise, it's a whole messed up system. And this is why we are ending up with, children with skills that are not appealing to the market. Yes, you've passed your degree or whatever qualification. It's a paper that, and nothing wrong with, going to school and going through those kind of processes, but they have to meet expectations in the job market, right? What does the job market ask for, and what kind of skills are we giving them? And this is why it's important. Parents have to be involved in these things.
Absolutely.
And other players to fix this kind of gaps.
Absolutely. You mentioned also a challenge you had is getting mentors along the way. Uh, who who were you able to find to support you on that? Did you manage to get a few mentors to help you, and how did they support you on your journey?
Okay, so yes, I did get mentors at the end, but then I would say what has really helped me is the different initiatives that target women and girls, right? So I'm a beneficiary of those programs, and
Oh,
they
wonderful.
really helped me. So I'd say thumbs up to the people who are running girls and women initiatives because they are filling that space that needs to be seriously addressed. So just being very specific. So in 2014, I happened to be selected for the Tech Women program. And this is a program that is run by the US State Department. And it was launched by Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. So I was selected on the program and I got to spend some time in the Silicon Valley. And this is where I met a huge group of women who were making it big in the Silicon Valley, right? And so for me, that changed how I looked at a lot of things and also shaped what I do even today, because I saw what these women are doing in the Silicon Valley, having built their own tribe of women out there, doing big things there. And I felt I needed to do more, come and make a difference as well. And it's even from that I launched the Kenya chapter of Women in Tech in 2015 and also became the NEF ambassador, because all these things, I was reflecting on my journey and the time I spent during that program. And it really defined what I did afterwards. And this is why I'm still very passionate about, getting the supporting women and girls in STEM.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is amazing. That is amazing. And it's always great to hear about such programs that support women and to grow and also to get access to mentors and to hear and learn from other women who've succeeded in their career paths.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious about the women who might not be able to join such programs. Why do you think it's such a struggle for women and girls to get mentors, especially female mentors? And more importantly, what can be done to increase access to either such programs or mentorship in general?
Okay, so I think the struggle with mentors, first of all, mentors have to also put themselves out there. And I like what a lot of schools are doing right now. Many girls are beginning to go back to the schools they attended. They are trying to really bring back the alumni groups and do stuff for their schools. So and that's something that will help this generation, because so many girls, I'm sure probably even you from the school you attended, there's something some people from the school are trying to do. And so some of them are going back and if they are lawyers, for example, speak about their journeys as lawyers during school's career days and things like that. So I think that's one way to increase the number of mentors in schools and not just leave it to career teachers. So put yourselves out. If you know you're a woman, for example, and you have a skill that will make a difference, put yourself out there and try and make some impact, however little it may be, do that. And then that's, again, another way to increase this pool of mentors. Because if people are not volunteering, because a lot of this is volunteering, right? And so we need to really learn to volunteer. And this is something I picked up in the Silicon Valley. There's a lot of volunteerism. Here, when you ask people to volunteer, they'll either do stuff very half-heartedly, I'm not being paid for it, so why should I?
Why put in the effort?
Yeah. So we really need to change that attitude.
Absolutely.
And do a lot more. And also the ones who are looking for mentors, you really have to also look for them, so it's a two-way street. You can't just sit back and wait for these things. There are a lot of programs that are going on targeted towards women and girls, very many programs. But sometimes the uptake is not good. And I've had people tell me, for example, when I'm running some of the women in tech initiatives that I run, they say maybe you should charge for them.
Oh.
Because if people pay, then
they'll be more committed?
Yes, they'll be more committed. Because sometimes you find they'll sign up, they don't show up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let's be very deliberate as women and girls. Let's take up this opportunities that come our way. If there's a mentoring program that's out there, please take advantage of it. Don't assume there'll always be a next time, because there might never be a next time.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to grab these opportunities and also be very deliberate in finding mentors. But the more we get more women committing to these things, the better.
Mm-hmm. So women in technology, in the engineering field, basically women in STEM, tend to receive a lot of discrimination versus their male counterparts. Why do you think that is?
Okay, I think, first of all, there's the underrepresentation side of it.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have the numbers, then it becomes very difficult to fight back, because, you're wondering, I'm just the only one, or maybe it's just a handful of you that are, that have to fight against this discrimination. So what happens a lot of the time is some people just end up quitting those environments and going to find something else to do,
mm-hmm.
or maybe trying another organization. So that the few numbers are really contributing to, women feeling that discrimination more. And unless men are allies and, try to also back up these women. And this is why we can never fight these battles on our own. We
Absolutely.
need allies, and we need those male allies. They need to be the ones ensuring that women are protected in these spaces,
mm-hmm.
right? The other thing is, when you look at tech in general, tech is a white man's field. White men dominate that space. And so because of that, there's a lot of, remember, so we are trickling down from the dominance of the white male in the space. And then you look at, again, the women in that space. So when you start looking at women, again, the dominant women in the tech space are white women. So race playing out and gender playing out. And so I think this is why it tends to manifest itself very strongly,
mm-hmm.
And especially on women of color.
Mm-hmm.
So there needs to be more women in that space. So there's need for all these initiatives to ensure that women are not underrepresented, so that they don't feel discriminated on. And also the allyship that I just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. We certainly should have more male support. And even the whole concept of, if you see something, say something. Just because
precisely
you feel like it's not your battle, I'm a man, this is a woman's battle, let them fight it.
Yeah.
You might end up being a father to a girl. You'll have your daughters, you have your aunties, you have your mother, the woman who actually gave you life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it is all of our battles.
Yes.
Because none of us would be here if it wasn't for a woman somewhere who sacrificed herself, her body to bring you to this world.
Yeah.
Quite literally.
Yeah, precisely.
And I find it very sad that we'll have a lot of people going up in arms for the racial cause and complaining about racial equity and the discrimination that is there. And then when you talk about, what about women and the discrimination we face as women? Because we're first being discriminated based on our race. Then you're being discriminated based on your gender. But when you pull out the gender card, oh no, you're being too sensitive.
Yeah. And we shouldn't be muzzled. I always tell people, a lot of the time, in fact, you asked me about challenge earlier, and I didn't mention this, but a lot of the time, especially people who are, trying to champion for the girls and women's space, every time things are done, we are hit back with, what about the boy child?
Mm-hmm.
And and it seems like we are tagging each other, and that should not be the case.
No.
And I always tell people, nobody wants the boy child to be left behind. And the fact that women are voicing concerns about girls, for example, does not mean they don't care about the boy child. The issues that affect the boy child are very different from the issues that affect the girl child.
Mm-hmm.
So let's be very categorical in what we are speaking about. Let's champion for what fits the girls without being seen as people who are fighting against the boy child.
Absolutely.
We, for example, in the STEM space, are fighting for things like closing the gender digital divide.
Mm-hmm.
We need more women to be able to afford phones.
Mm-hmm.
Very few women actually own phones.
Mm-hmm.
We need more women in these spaces, right? So how can we go and say we need more men in STEM when that is not the problem, right? So if there's something that affects men, or boys, let's address that,
mm-hmm.
right? And not try to dissuade people and, it's being toxic. Really.
Exactly, absolutely.
Because you're not seeing why people are doing these things. If you understood why there's, this championing for girls and why that is happening, we would not be having that rebuttal. Oh, what about the boy child?
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel there's something the boy child needs that needs to be addressed, please go ahead and do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. It's a conversation I've also had, unfortunately, where you talk about women empowerment and building something for women. That is always the rebuttal. What about the boy? The boy child is being forgotten.
Yeah.
And people try to turn or twist your words in a way that it seems like you're saying focusing on the girl's child is not focusing on the boy child.
Exactly.
We're not saying that we need to do one or the other. We can do both.
Yes, precisely.
We can do both. We can build, you're really right saying that the problems the girl child is facing are very different from the problems the boy child is facing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we can pull a program for girls and just implement it for boys. We need to focus on both, but it should never come out as one or the other.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
Let's identify what the challenges are and develop a program for girls to meet the needs and the challenges they're facing. And we can do the same for boys, develop a similar program for them as well.
Yeah.
And the funny thing I find about it is that you often find women really trying to develop programs for girls. And you find men complaining about the programs that these women are developing, saying, what about the boy child? But they're not trying to also initiate something for the boy child themselves.
Exactly. We cannot speak about things we don't understand.
Absolutely.
Women will speak about things that they understand. And it should be the same thing. We need to support each other in those different initiatives and not, because there are people who've actually said they are not running girls' programs because they don't want to be seen as toxic feminists. And that's the other thing. Being a feminist is not a bad thing.
It's not a dirty word.
It's not a dirty word, but it's been made to seem like it is a negative thing. And it's actually putting off some people. They're like, oh, I don't want to do this because I don't want people to think I am like this or the other. So let's just stop that, Let's not demonize some of those things, because I don't think most of the time it's for positive gain. It's not to put another gender above or beneath the other.
Absolutely. And even as we're asking them to be allies, we'll be allies in the programs that they're trying to develop as well.
Exactly.
Absolutely. But this brings me now to the myth, because you talked about people assuming that feminism is a dirty word and it should not be mentioned. What are some of the myths that are out there around women in STEM? And, can we bust some of those myths today?
Yeah. I think one of the myths is people saying that girls are not interested in STEM. And the other is girls are not as good as boys, or women are not as good as men in STEM. Those are the two major myths. And I'll give an example. So a few years back, my daughter was part of a maths competition at Strathmore University. She was doing it. It was an Olympiad for IGCSE students from across Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
She was 15 at the time, and there were other kids who were much older than her. And she came top,
Wow.
In that contest.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And there are so many other women, who've done very well in STEM fields, in the maths, in the engineering, in, the science. I think you mentioned about actuarial science and things, So they are, a lot of the time, these girls, you may not realize that they are doing well because either they are not in some of those classes because of this very things that we've been talking about, why they don't get into STEM, but it doesn't mean that they are not good at STEM. When we look at computer science, for example, examples of Ada Lovelace, the likes of Grace Hopper, they made major contributions in computer science, and they're women. And there's so many other innovations that inventions that women have been part of. And we've had these things, sometimes women coming up with innovations, but they are credited to men and things like that. But there are so many women who've actually had major contributions in STEM. And so we need to start showcasing these women.
Absolutely.
And I remember there's a program that recognized some of us. They did a card project, the playing cards project. And on those cards, there's like 54 cards in a pack of cards. And on each of those cards, there was a face of a woman and what they did. And what they were doing with this card project was basically, give them to schools and communities. And when kids are playing, they can actually see a face of a woman on those cards. And it says, like Sylvia Mukasa, this is what she's done on that card. And so they are playing a game, but they are also learning from it and seeing some of these faces. So we need to put out as many women as possible. And I'll call out to media people, especially, they should use their platforms to showcase women because right now social media is a huge platform that can be used, and it doesn't cost so much to put these women out there. And when we recognize women, or when women do or achieve something, we need to recognize them.
Absolutely.
Because that lack of recognition, again, limits the number of women who are known out there. And for us as women, we need to also put ourselves out there. Let's stop this whole, being humble kind of stuff.
You want to seem as if you're boasting or bragging.
Those who think you're boasting, that's their problem. I personally struggled with putting myself out there because, I always felt, people might think I'm just showing off or, until, I had to tell myself, what, you're not putting this out there because you are bragging. And anyway, there's even nothing wrong with bragging. But it's not that you are focused on just bragging. What you're trying to do is you're trying to send a message that if you can do something or if you can make this kind of achievement, other people can as well. That's the bottom line that you're trying to put yourself out there for people to see. Because some people will be like, I know this person. I grew up with them. And if they can do this, then I can also do the same. I went to school with them. If they can do this, I can do the same. So let's put ourselves out there so that we don't have this struggle of who are these women in STEM and, the younger generation not having faces to connect with in these spaces.
Absolutely. I love what you're saying there. And definitely it's something that a lot more women need to do because you putting yourself out there, showing your achievements, what you've done, what you've accomplished, even just sharing each of your milestones in your journey, there's always someone watching you. And I've heard people say this, there are people who are watching you who you may not be aware of. And you're encouraging them, you're motivating them. It could be your daughter, your niece, your neighbor, the friend you have on LinkedIn or other social media platforms who've perhaps you don't even know them. but they're watching you and they're seeing what you're doing. And it really does encourage and motivate them to want to get to your level and to achieve what you've done. So I love what you're saying there. I agree with it 100%.
Yeah.
And even the playing cards, I will certainly look for them. I wasn't aware.
Yes, I will send you the link. So this professor at the University of Duke, Duke, is it the University of Duke or Duke University? No offense, Duke. Yeah, so they, it was part, so this was like a mother and daughter who came up with this project, and they were showcasing this at the Grace Hopper celebration. So Grace Hopper, I've mentioned Grace Hopper. She was computer scientist, and there's always a celebration every year, the Grace Hopper celebration. And so different tech companies and, go and convene somewhere in the US. Most of the time it's in the US. And they do recruitment drives and all manner of things there. So around that time, they decided to, a few years back, I think around 2015, thereabout, 2015, 2016. So they came up with the program. I'll share with you the link.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That'll be amazing.
So those cards, so they have, they have a daughter project. So I was showcased on the daughter project with 53 other women. But then there's also the main one, the main cards, which have like really highly achieved women in computer science who are also on those cards. So there's two kind of packs, but they all have phenomenal women on them.
Absolutely, that is amazing. I'll definitely get some for my daughter.
Yes,
it's always great. What I have seen before is the Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't.
It's a volume. It's a series of books which every chapter just talks about. So it has mini stories of women, about 100 or so plus stories of women who have accomplished different things from various sectors. And it's it's a simple, easy book to read with your child at night.
Nice one.
And different volumes as well. So it helps. What I like about it is that it creates that visibility, because you'll see women who are in STEM, women who are entertainment, but basically women who have accomplished a lot.
Yeah.
And it helps to let them know from an early age that you can accomplish a lot too. Right? Rather than reading the story of the prince who swooped up the princess and saved her from a dragon and a burning building, or it's definitely a good replacement of that.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
But I really do admire all the work that you're doing. And I'm wondering, when it comes to, you talk about women, especially when you're saying women showcasing themselves a lot or speaking up, and it's true, we are a little humble. I'm wondering how much that plays out when it comes to even applying for jobs. I've heard a few male counterparts even say they're trying to hire maybe a woman for a certain tech role, but they can't seem to find anyone. They're not getting applications. In fact, sometimes they'll clearly say they're looking for a woman for this particular role, and they'll get a lot of male applications. And I'm so wondering, where are the women? Why are they not applying?
So, first of all, the numbers, we don't really have the numbers. But the recruiting organizations are also not doing us any justice. Because, first of all, women have been known to want to tick all the boxes before they apply for a job. And yet when we are putting out these job adverts, the kind of words we use can be a put-off. So an example, so you need these developers, and then you go and say, we are looking for a code ninja, or we are looking for a code rockstar, and things like that. Already, that sets a tone, right? It sets a tone even about your culture as an organization. So, the women will look and say, ninja. Not a ninja, So the ones we use can be a put-off. Then also, how many things are we asking for? If you go and put a myriad of things you want, most of the time, The women will be looking, and as they're ticking those boxes, and because your line of expectations or, what you want, the kind of skills you want them to have are like that, a very long list, it is highly likely they are not going to apply.
Yeah.
Right? So let's minimize what we are asking for, and especially for roles that don't really need too many skills.
Yeah.
Right? If you're looking for a junior role, why would you be asking for so much? Unless you're looking for a very high up position that needs a lot more.
Some level of expertise.
Yeah, tone down what your expectations are. The other thing is, we can't be complaining about a lack of talent and we are doing nothing about it. Okay? Organizations need to be very categorical in giving these skills. And this is why for us, even at Global X, that is very important. If there are no skills, there'll be a struggle, even for entrepreneurship. And, you can't be an entrepreneur when you do not have skills.
Yeah.
You can't be a programmer when you don't have the right skills. Without skills, you basically cannot do anything. And we cannot leave it to certain people to be the ones who are churning out the skill set. We also have to contribute as recruiters, right? Or as recruiting organizations. So organizations also need to put in effort. I've seen the likes of Andela have programs geared towards women.
Yes,
absolutely. Right? So what are we? We can't be complaining, but we are not doing anything. Yeah. So that needs to happen. And then how do we pay? When we start looking at pay, there's no equal pay. It's again, very different for women and men for the same jobs most of the time, right? So when we do those kind of things, what are we saying as hiring organizations? You're going to have pay disparities, and then people now are not interested in certain roles, and then you come back and complain that you cannot get people. We have to address all these things.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And it's a good point you're saying there, really. And especially when it comes to the pay, you find that organizations are very eager to hire women. They'll probably even give them a lot of the workload because they are perhaps performing well. Now, I'm not saying that women perform better than men. It's really individual based. But you find a scenario sometimes where a woman is performing quite well. But when going into salary negotiations, there's a lot of pushback on increasing or giving a raise or giving some sort of bonus versus the men who will at times, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but there has been scenarios where they've just done the bare minimum and there's a lot of praise, bonuses, and contributions. And I'm wondering, is it certainly can't be intentional. Is it an unconscious bias, or is it just basically chauvinism?
First of all, you need to understand, or you need to know your value. Because once you know your value, people will not be playing around with you. Okay? And sometimes, yes, it's okay, especially when you're starting out, it's okay to get the raw deals, but it gets to a point, you can't keep doing the raw deals, right? And we have to learn to ask. Men will ask without blinking, are you paying for this? We don't. A lot of the time, they're like, oh, they'll think I'm not, I don't want to give back. Women's Day, whenever we have this days dedicated for women, I was approached, and I made a lot of noise about this. I was approached about, they were like, oh, we are showcasing women for International Women's Day. And this magazine, they wanted me to pay a fortune
to be showcased
in their magazine.
Wow. And they reached out to you.
International Women's Day.
Wow.
Then I said, you see, these are the games that organizations are playing. When you see a woman featured in some of these publications, okay? And it's okay. I know people pay for publicity. That is okay. If you want to pay for publicity, that's okay. But you can imagine, this is something for International Women's Day. It's a day you are trying to showcase women, and then you are charging them. What happens is a lot of people will open this magazine and they'll look and they'll say, oh, this is a very good magazine. They even showcase women. What you don't know is they've actually charged these women. And you know what? I declined. I said, no, not on International Women's Day. I wish you even asked me about this for another day, but not on International Women's Day. Yeah.
I think what even gets me more about that story is the fact that they reached out to you.
Yeah.
So they saw value in your personal brand as Sylvia and what you've done to want to showcase you in their magazine, and they saw the benefit that will have to their magazine, but they still wanted you to pay for it.
And it was a paid for magazine, by the way. So they're giving out the magazine. I mean, they're selling the magazine. They want features for women for International Women's Day, but they want you to pay.
That is very unfortunate.
And I was like, how many organizations are doing this? And this is why we have to be very careful. There are some organizations or, people who are running initiatives, but they're not really genuine. They are just riding on
the hype that is there around female empowerment and gender equity. And there's just seen a money opportunity. And we can even go through a whole other discussion of this, because even in investments, you find a gender call, which is mainly targeting female-led enterprises. And you'll find someone who's either added their spouse there and mentioned them as a co-founder in quotes, or they've added a colleague and said one of their employees who's a woman, and they've said, okay, I've given her 1% or 2% of the company. And now we want to apply for millions of funding because we are a gender-focused company. It's very unfortunate because the funding and the opportunities that are already out there for women are already limited as it is. And then we have these, and we have people trying to play games or misusing those opportunities, which makes it even harder for women to benefit from them, for the people who they're developed for to actually benefit from them.
Precisely. Yeah. So there are good, there are people with good intention, but there are also those without good intention. So you have to be very deliberate and know who exactly you're dealing with and what they're up to.
Absolutely. And you've given a lot of great advice, especially to the companies that are looking to set up programs or even to hire women. I'm wondering what advice you have now to the women themselves who are either looking for mentorship, looking for programs to help them grow, or just generally looking to venture into the STEM industry.
Yeah. So they have to look for the opportunities. You have to have the hunger to get this information or to get these opportunities. There are so many opportunities. And this is one thing that, a few years back, not so many of these opportunities were there, but right now there are so many initiatives that are trying to address the whole gap of women in STEM. So you have to look for those opportunities. There are people who, especially the young people, they will spend a lot of time on, on TikTok, on Facebook. But most of the time, they're not looking out for these opportunities there. They're just, probably seeking other entertainment. And it's okay to seek that entertainment. That's fine. But also take the time to look for opportunities. There are a lot of opportunities that you just need to look for and seize. And then the other thing is also they have to knock doors and knock as many doors as they can. Sometimes you will not get a response and it's okay. Sometimes you will get a no. There's a time I was doing an interview somewhere. I was interviewing someone and we talked about mentorship, and she was a brilliant engineer, young engineer. And I remember when we got to the mentorship side of things, when we asked her, when the panel asked her about her experience in mentorship, she burst out crying.
Wow.
And, we just left there wondering what was going on. But the reason she was crying is she had a really nasty experience with someone she had hoped would mentor her. But I think the person
took advantage.
Was maybe cruel in the way they handled her. And eventually did not even mentor her. And I think it traumatized her.
no.
Because by the time someone is bursting out in tears in an interview room, we are strangers, we don't know each other, it tells you how traumatizing that was. So knock doors, expect the no's, and sometimes expect no response. But you have to keep on asking and keep on knocking. Yeah, not everyone will give an answer, and sometimes you may not get the answer you want, but keep searching.
Yeah. Oh, that is very unfortunate. I think also maybe to add on to that as well, sometimes the yeses you get might end up not being what you thought it would be, what you bargained for.
Yes.
And it's okay to walk away.
Yeah.
It's okay to just say, all right, this is not what I was expecting. Walk away. Don't feel the need to stay there and because you owe no one nothing.
Exactly.
You do not owe anyone anything. So you protect yourself.
Exactly.
And I think we've been raised to be very selfless as women. Even when you're young girls, you have to take care of your younger brothers or your siblings.
Yeah.
And that creates, and I guess maybe also our expectations sometimes as mothers, you tend to be a little bit nurturing and caring and you want to give people second chances. Walk away. It's okay to say no. It's okay to walk away from a bad situation, a bad or a toxic scenario, just to protect yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. And also adding onto that, mentors do not have to be people you know directly. A lot of the time people also think that the mentor should be someone physical that you meet and talk. You can have people you just follow, like people you follow on LinkedIn or on Twitter that you feel add value to what you're trying to achieve. So let's not also think that you can't have a mentor you've never met. Yeah, that is still very practical.
If there was, we've talked about so much today, from mentorship all the way to schools and academia and the programs they have, even speaking about some of the challenges that have been there. If you look into, let's say, 5-10 years from now, if there was one thing that you would love to see change, especially when it comes to women in the STEM industry, what would that be?
So for me, what I'd like to see is more women in leadership positions and, board level positions. So there's been a lot of changes, especially, when we look at how many women can code, for example, right now, there's been an increase in that, right? We are still not there, but definitely the numbers have increased, and in so many other areas. But the struggle is still at leadership positions and board level. Still, there's a challenge there. And so I would hope that the numbers increase, and we are seeing a lot of changes the other day. In fact, yesterday, I think there was an announcement about a new managing director for Microsoft Africa Development Center.
Yes.
A woman. And we are seeing women, rising up. And so I'm hoping that will definitely change significantly in the next 5 to 10 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what will be now, I guess, to wrap up the program, what last word of advice or guidance would you like to give to the young girls who are interested in STEM?
So what I'd like to say to the young girls is that they can do it, right? There's nothing that they cannot do. Let us not say STEM is for boys and men. The girls are equally capable of doing it. And they just need to believe in themselves and try different things. You never know what you like until you try out things. Even if right now you're saying, I cannot do maths, please just try. And if it doesn't work out, then leave it. Just the same way you would drop any other subject if you felt you didn't like it, but you have to try it. Don't let nobody tell you you will not be able to do something just because of your gender. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure and honor speaking with you. There's a lot of great work that you're doing, which I really admire. And I hope we'll have you in our subsequent talks and sessions, because this has been so much fun. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it as well. So thank you for joining us. This is season 2 of Investing for Impact, and I'm joined here today by the lovely Sylvia.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Right.
Yeah.